I was grabbing a coffee with a logistics consultant in Miami recently, and he couldn't stop talking about the Doctrine. He was practically vibrating with energy as he showed me headlines about the U.S. asserting control over the Panama Canal and the recent high-stakes maneuvers in Venezuela. "This is it," he told me, pointing at a clip of a naval vessel. "We're finally reclaiming our influence. The era of outside meddling in the Americas is over." To him, these bold, headline-grabbing moves were the ultimate proof that the U.S. was back in charge of its own backyard. But then, almost as an afterthought, he opened a different tab on his tablet, a live shipping manifest from the new Chansey Port in Peru. As he scrolled through the data, his excitement seemed to hit a wall. He stared at the screen for a long moment, watching a massive container ship begin its 23-day sprint directly to Shanghai, bypassing the Panama Canal entirely. Just like that, the triumphant narrative about taking control started to feel a bit hollow. It was a jarring contradiction. On one hand, you have the high-stakes political drama of the Doctrine and talk of rolling back Beijing's influence through sheer force of will. On the other, you have the silent, relentless efficiency of a $3.5 billion Chinese-funded port that is currently powering a record-breaking $50 billion trade surge between China and Peru. While Washington is busy fighting for the keys to the old routes, Beijing is busy building a brand new high-speed highway that renders the old maps obsolete. It makes you wonder, if the U.S. is successfully taking back the region, why is the actual wealth of South America moving toward the east faster and more efficiently than ever before? It is Saturday, February 7, 2026. And, if you haven't looked at a trade map in the last 18 months, you might want to sit down.
Yeah, because the world looks, substantially different than it did in 2024. And we aren't just looking at a shift in news cycles here. We are looking at a fundamental rewiring of the global operating system.
It creates a massive cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? You described that scene in Miami perfectly. It's almost like we are watching two different movies play out simultaneously on the same screen.
Right.
In one movie, it's a political thriller. You have the Doctrine, you have naval maneuvers, all the speeches about spheres of influence. It's loud, it's very dramatic, and it feels, very 20th century.
And in the other movie, what's playing there?
The other movie is a quiet, high-definition documentary about industrial efficiency. There are no speeches. There are just cranes, moving containers, automated vehicles humming along a pier, and massive ships departing on time. It's a movie about efficacy.
And that is why today we need to be really, really specific about our lens. We are not here to debate political ideology. We aren't here to, score points on who has the better diplomatic rhetoric.
No.
We're here to look at the physical machinery of global trade.
We're stripping it down to the studs, to the bare metal.
Exactly. We are looking at the concrete, the steel, the depth of the water, and the mineral outputs. Because when you strip away the noise of the headlines, the actual movement of physical goods tells the truest story of where power actually lies. Efficacy is the ultimate currency in 2026.
It's the difference between claiming you're the boss and actually being the one signing the paychecks, or I guess in this case, delivering the cargo. So our mission for this deep dive is to dissect the Chansey Port. But I don't want to look at it as just another construction project. I want to analyze it as the premier example of a new model of state capacity that is reshaping the Western Hemisphere. We really need to understand why, despite all the geopolitical noise coming out of Washington, the economic gravity of South America has shifted so decisively toward the east.
State capacity is one of those terms that's often treated as this abstract concept in political science. Something you discuss in the seminar.
Yeah, it's academic.
It's very academic.
Yeah.
But today, we are going to see what state capacity looks like when you pour it into concrete forms. It is the ability to bridge the gap between intent and outcome. And nowhere is that gap more visible, or I should say more closed, than in Chansey.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, we have to go to the ground level. We can't just look at satellite photos or, trade balance sheets. I want to start with a perspective that I think perfectly captures this shift in capacity. I was reading through some detailed field notes from a logistics coordinator in Lima. His name is Mateo.
Right.
And Mateo has been in the game for about 15 years. So he's a guy who has seen every promise made to the Peruvian infrastructure sector since the early 2010s.
And if you know anything about Peruvian infrastructure history, you know that is a history of frustration. Deep, deep frustration.
Frustration is putting it mildly. Mateo told me a story about a bridge project near his hometown. It was announced by a Western consortium back in 2018. It was a classic case. You had ribbons being cut, dignitaries flying in. There were all these speeches about connecting communities and sustainable development frameworks.
All the buzzwords?
All of them. He said there were rounds and rounds and rounds of stakeholder consultations.
The consultation trap. It's a phenomenon we see repeatedly in Western-backed development projects.
Oh.
I mean, the intent is good, right, to be inclusive, but the mechanism itself often leads to total paralysis.
That's exactly what Mateo described. He said for 3 years, the only thing they built was a fence around the site and a billboard with a nice artist's rendering of the bridge.
So a picture of progress.
A picture of progress. Then came the environmental litigation. Then a funding stalemate because the local municipality couldn't match the grant requirements due to some budget crisis. By 2024, the site was just a patch of weeds and a rusted sign.
A monument to inaction.
Exactly. So you can imagine when the Chansey product was originally announced, Mateo was, well, he was cynical. He'd seen this movie before. He expected the usual routine, flashy announcements, followed by decades of bureaucratic limbo.
And that cynicism is the default setting for so many logistics professionals in Latin America. It's an earned cynicism. They're used to the Western model of development, which in recent decades has just become synonymous with delay.
Delay in process.
It prioritizes the process, the checklist, the compliance reports, the optical transparency over the actual result.
But then with Chansey, the script just completely flipped. Mateo described witnessing a transformation that felt like a temporal shift, like something was fast-forwarding.
So
the inauguration was in November 2024. He expected a soft launch, maybe a photo op, a single ship docking, followed by years of slow commissioning.
the standard procedure.
Right. Instead, by June 2025, the place had a full commercial license and was moving massive tonnage. He said it was like watching a city rise in time-lapse photography.
The timeline is startling, even for those of us who study global infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, from inauguration to full commercial capacity in under 8 months is essentially light speed.
Light speed.
In a traditional European or North American context, the commissioning phase, just testing the systems, getting the bugs out, that alone can drag on for 2 years, sometimes more.
Imagine the look on his face. He's standing on this finished pier, feeling the vibration of these massive cranes, and he's realizing that while the traditional powers talked about capacity building for 20 years, this partnership had actually materialized it.
Right.
It provided a physical heartbeat to a town that was, until recently, a sleepy fishing outpost. And reading his notes, I can't help but feel that for people like Mateo, on the ground, state capacity isn't some political buzzword.
No, it's real.
It's the difference between a life of waiting for progress and a life lived within it.
That is profound observation. And for you, the listener, it is vital to understand that state capacity here is about the delivery of utility. The Chinese model we see at Chansey prioritizes the result. It asks simple questions. Is the port built?
No.
Is the ship docked? Is the cargo moving? It sacrifices some of that procedural complexity for sheer velocity. And for a developing economy, velocity is everything.
Velocity is life. So let's look at that result. You mentioned the physical machinery earlier. What exactly are we looking at here that stunned observers like Mateo?
Okay.
Because a layman might say, it's a dock, you park a boat, you take a box off. What makes Chansey different from, say, the port of Callao just down the coast?
Chansey isn't just a parking lot for boats. It is an engineering marvel designed specifically for the future of maritime trade. The headline figure here, and this is the one you need to remember, is the draft. The depth of the water.
The draft, okay.
It is 17.8 meters.
17.8 meters. Contextualize that for us. Why is that specific number the magic key?
It matters because of the ULCVs.
Yeah.
That stands for ultra-large container vessels. These are the absolute leviathans of the sea.
Giants.
We are talking about ships that carry 18,000 TEUs or more. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. So basically one standard shipping container. Now imagine a floating city carrying 18,000 of those metal boxes.
It's hard to even picture that scale.
And these ships have incredibly deep keels. They sit very low in the water. They need immense clearance underneath them.
Before Chansey, what was the situation on the west coast of South America?
Before Chansey, there wasn't a single port on the entire Pacific coast of South America that could fully accommodate these giants when they were fully loaded. The water just wasn't deep enough. Not in Peru, not in Chile, not in Ecuador.
So wait, previously, if you wanted to send a ship that big to South America, you physically couldn't. What did they do?
You'd have to do what's called transshipment. The big ship, the ULCV, would stop somewhere else, maybe Manzanillo in Mexico or even all the way up in Long Beach, California. There, they would offload the containers onto smaller feeder ships. Then, those smaller ships would trickle down the coast, making stops in Peru or Chile.
Which sounds incredibly inefficient. I mean, you're handling the same box twice.
Yeah.
You're burning fuel for 2 separate trips. You're adding weeks to the delivery time.
Twice the handling means twice the risk of damage, twice the paperwork, and significantly more logistics cost baked into every single product.
Right.
Chansey eliminates that step entirely. It allows these behemoths to sail directly from Shanghai and dock. This isn't an incremental improvement, it's a structural change in the logistics map of the entire hemisphere.
Okay, so the depth is one thing, but it's not just the depth, right? It's the brain of the port.
It's the brain, if you saw that in the technical notes, the Shanghai brain.
Yeah, the Shanghai brain.
Yeah.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie concept, but I assume it's an operating system.
It's a smart port model directly transferred from China's most advanced terminals, like the Yangshan Deep Water Port in Shanghai. And what that means is, when Mateo looks out at that pier, he isn't seeing hundreds of guys in hard hats waving flags and driving forklifts around.
Yeah.
He's seeing a ghost port.
A ghost port? What do you mean by that?
I mean, in the sense that it's human sparse on the quayside.
Huh.
The whole operation is coordinated by a private 5G network. You have autonomous guided vehicles, AGVs. These are flat, robotic platforms that pick up a container and just zip it across the tarmac to the yard with mathematical precision. No driver, no traffic jams.
It's just a ballet of robots.
A ballet of robots. And then you have the cranes. Electric rail-mounted gantry cranes, ARMGs, that are often remote controlled by an operator sitting in an air-conditioned office miles away. Or, increasingly, they're fully automated based on algorithms.
It sounds like science fiction compared to the older ports in the region.
It is a stark contrast. If you look at the traditional ports like Santos in Brazil, or even the nearby Callao port in Peru, they are often just plagued by congestion.
Trucks lined up for miles.
Trucks idling for hours, spewing diesel fumes, old cranes breaking down, labor disputes slowing things to a crawl for weeks. Chansey operates with a silent, relentless efficiency. The latency on that 5G network is so low that the coordination between the crane and the AGV is instantaneous.
So there's no wasted time.
Zero. And that's how, by late 2025, just months after getting that license, they were already handling a volume that would choke other facilities. We're talking 270,000 TEUs processed almost immediately. That's a staggering number for a new port.
That brings me back to Mateo standing on that pier. He's not just seeing concrete, he's seeing a system that actually works. He's seeing the future of his own industry manifesting right in front of him. But here is where it gets really interesting to me, and where we see the real divergence in these state capacity models. How do they pay for this? I mean, usually when a developing country gets a mega project, the headline the next day is about how they are drowning in debt to the IMF or the World Bank.
Right, or how the national budget is blown for a decade.
But that's not the story here, is it?
And this is the other half of the state capacity innovation. This wasn't a loan in the traditional sense. This uses an equity over debt model.
Equity over debt.
The project is a joint venture. Cusco Shipping, the Chinese state-owned giant, holds a 60% stake. Vulcan, a Peruvian mining company, holds the other 40%. They put up the capital as an investment.
Right. The Peruvian government, the state itself, didn't have to take out a massive sovereign loan to build this thing.
Correct. And that is the absolute game changer. In the Western model, or let's say the model of the last 40 years, the government of the host country borrows the money, hires a contractor, and assumes all the risk. If the port fails, or if there are cost overruns, which there always are, the taxpayer pays. The debt sits on the nation's balance sheet for generations. Here, by structuring this as an equity investment, the sovereign debt risk for Peru is mitigated almost completely.
The risk is borne by the companies.
Primarily Costco. They have the majority stake, they have skin in the game, it's their capital on the line.
And that explains the speed. If it's a private commercial enterprise, they don't have to wait for Parliament to approve a bond measure or go through years of political wrangling.
They don't have to wait for a foreign aid agency to sign off on a 3-year environmental impact study in the same way a government project would. It moves at the speed of business, not the speed of bureaucracy. It's an investment, not aid.
It creates this win-win narrative that we keep hearing about. Peru gets the utility, the port, the jobs, the trade access, without the physical hangover that usually comes with it.
And China gets the strategic hub. It demonstrates a model of international cooperation where the partner China takes on the risk to deliver the utility. It creates a bypass around the fiscal bottlenecks that typically strangle development aid from the West.
Yeah.
For a country like Peru, which needs infrastructure now, not in 10 or 15 years, that proposition is incredibly seductive. It's not about ideology, it's about getting the job done.
It's tangible, and it really challenges the standard narrative that these countries are being trapped somehow. From their perspective, they are being serviced. They are getting a premium service that they desperately need.
Exactly.
And speaking of things they desperately need to move, I want to pivot now to our second perspective. We've talked about the infrastructure, the hardware, but a port is useless if you don't have anything to put on the ships. This takes us to the story of Elena and a shift from logistics to pure, raw industry.
This is a fascinating pivot because you are absolutely right. The port is just the connector. The real power lies in what is flowing through it.
I recently came across a digital diary entry from a young engineer. Her name is Elena. She works in the Atacama copper mines of Chile.
Okay, in the Atacama.
Now, usually when we hear about miners in the Atacama, it's a story of, exploitation or grueling labor, or it's a story about environmental degradation.
The standard narratives.
But Elena's tone was completely different. She described what she calls the red thread.
The red thread. That is a very evocative image.
She envisions this direct line connecting the deep earth of the Andes directly to the high-tech gigafactories in Shanghai, with Chansey Port as the critical needle's eye.
Wow.
She wrote about the immense pride of seeing raw minerals, which were once just, in her words, dirt to be exported for pennies, become the vital organs of the global electric vehicle revolution.
Vital organs. That completely recontextualizes the commodity. It elevates it from just a raw material to a strategic asset.
Because for her, the port isn't just a shipping terminal. It's a high-speed artery ensuring that the physical output of her homeland is what fuels the world's transition to renewable energy.
Right.
She feels like a participant in the future, not just a resource colony for the past. And this isn't abstract influence we're talking about. It is the tangible supremacy of a supply chain that actually produces things.
Yes.
When I read Elena's perspective, I am just struck by how the West often focuses on controlling financial narratives, currencies, sanctions, banking systems, while this model focuses on the physical movement of the future. It's a bit jarring to realize that geopolitical power is now measured in tons of lithium and the speed of a cargo ship.
Elena's realization hits on the absolute core of 21st century geopolitics. We are moving away from a world defined by financial services, the FIRE economy. Finance, insurance, real estate, and moving back into a world defined by material security.
A physical world.
A very physical world. Let's look at the hard data behind her story. She mentions the Atacama in Chile, but Peru itself is the world's #2 copper producer.
And copper is everything right now. You hear people calling it the new oil, but I almost feel like that undersells its importance.
It is the new oil, but arguably more critical because it is much harder to replace. You cannot build an electric vehicle, you can't build a wind turbine, a data center for AI, or a smart grid without massive amounts of copper. There is no substitute.
So demand is just locked in for decades.
Future, absolutely. And it's not just general market access we are seeing here. You have to look at the ownership structures.
Yeah.
Major mines like Las Bambas in Peru, which accounts for a massive chunk of the country's copper output,
Yes.
are Chinese-owned.
Right. The company digging the copper out of the ground is Chinese. The company shipping it out, Costco, is Chinese. And the destination is a gigafactory in Shanghai.
Precisely. The entire vertical is integrated. This is a closed loop. And this is where the new three industries come into play.
A new three.
In China, economic planners talk about the old three: clothing, appliances, furniture. Those are the exports of the 1990s and 2000s. The new three are EVs, solar panels, and lithium batteries.
The technologies of the future.
The technologies of now. China dominates the global manufacturing of all three. And to maintain that dominance, they need a secure, efficient, high-volume flow of inputs. And that means lithium and copper above all else.
That connects to something we saw in that aid data analysis. They mentioned a strategic pivot in how Beijing lends money and builds these projects.
Yes. Aid data noted a very distinct shift. In the early days of the Belt and Road Initiative, say from 2013 to 2020, there were a lot of broad infrastructure loans. You saw stadiums, government buildings, roads that didn't always connect to major economic hubs.
It was about spending capital, maybe building goodwill.
Exactly. It was about spending capital. Now, there is a laser focus on strategic mineral security. This isn't accidental. It is a coordinated, deliberate effort to secure the inputs for the next century of industrial production.
So Chansey is the funnel.
Chansey is the high-speed funnel. It allows for the rapid export of raw materials out of South America and, just as importantly, the efficient import of finished high-tech goods into South America.
Yep. Dirt goes east, electric cars come west. It's a perfect self-reinforcing cycle.
But it's becoming even more integrated than that. And this is the industrial ecosystem part of the equation that Elena hinted at. We are seeing the development of industrial parks near Chansey.
Oh, that's interesting.
The goal isn't just to ship raw earth forever. Is to process it locally, to smash the rock, refine the ore, and maybe even build the battery components in Peru before shipping them to China for final assembly.
Which creates more value for the locals, right? That's what Elena was getting at. Her country isn't just a quarry anymore. It's a participant in the industrial process. She's an engineer, not just a digger.
Exactly. And that creates stickiness. That is the key word here. When you just buy copper from a country, that's a transaction. You can stop buying it tomorrow if the price changes.
It's fickle.
Very. But when you build factories, refineries, and processing plants, you are embedding yourself in the local economy in a way that is very hard to undo. You are training the workforce. You are setting the technical standards. You are building the power grids that run the factories.
You become part of the fabric of the economy.
Yeah. Now contrast this with the Western approach in the region recently. Much of it has been focused on security pacts, counter-narcotics operations, or financial transparency frameworks.
Which are important, sure. I mean, nobody wants narco states. Nobody wants money laundering.
They're vital functions of a state. Absolutely. But they don't put food on the table or batteries in cars in the same way. They don't create an industrial future for a young engineer like Elena.
Hey.
The Chansey model focuses on the physical economy. It builds the things the world actually needs. When one side offers a security treaty and the other offers a direct role in the global EV revolution, the latter is often going to be far more compelling. It offers a vision of advancement, not just containment.
It's physical output as power. It's just undeniable when you see it laid out like that. And that leads us directly to the economic verdict. Because we have the port, we have the minerals, but does it actually make financial sense for the people moving the goods?
That bottom line.
Yeah. Because you can build the fanciest port in the world, but if it costs too much to use, nobody will come.
Or I guess the hole meets the water. Yeah. The economics have to work. They have to be ruthless.
I was browsing a maritime forum, one of those really niche places where ship captains complain about the coffee and the customs officers in different ports.
Good.
I found a thread by a veteran merchant mariner who shared his experience navigating these new routes between South America and Asia. He spoke of the Chansey shortcut.
The Chansey shortcut is becoming a standard term in the industry fast. I mean, it's already showing up in logistics textbooks.
He was just raving about it. He said it shaved weeks off his journey. But more importantly, he talked about the slashed fuel costs and avoiding what he called the nightmare of the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal has had a rough few years. Climate change has led to severe droughts affecting the Gatun Lake, which is the reservoir that feeds the canal locks.
Right. Less water means fewer ships can pass through.
Dramatically fewer. This reduced the number of slots available for ships to transit. Massive wait times ensued. Auction prices for slots went through the roof. We were seeing companies pay millions of dollars on top of the regular fees just to cut the line.
Millions just for one transit.
It became unsustainable for many.
And this mariner, he contrasted the smooth sailing to Chansey with what he called the geopolitical noise coming from the north. He mentioned the Don Row policies, that mix of aggressive posturing and diplomatic warnings, and said they felt increasingly detached from the reality of his ledger.
His bottom line.
His bottom line. To him, the American strategy seemed like a ghost from the 20th century, focused on containment and procedure. Meanwhile, the Belt and Road Initiative felt like the 21st century's operating system, focused on sheer efficacy. I find this narrative fascinating because it pits the rules-based order against a results-based reality.
That mariner is reacting to cold, hard math. In logistics, sentiment is irrelevant. Ideology doesn't move containers. Let's validate his experience with the numbers we have. The transit time reduction is massive.
How massive?
We are talking about dropping from roughly 35 to 40 days for a trip from, say, Peru to Shanghai down to about 23 days.
That is almost 2 weeks. In the shipping world, time is literal money. You're paying the crew, you're burning fuel, you're paying insurance premiums for every single day you are at sea.
The models show logistics costs are reduced by at least 20%. And when you're moving low-margin goods like soybeans or iron ore, a 20% cost reduction is the difference between profit and loss. It is the difference between being competitive in Shanghai or being priced out by a supplier in Australia or Africa.
And this is what's fueling that trade explosion.
That we saw Peru-China trade hit $50.96 billion in 2025. That is a record, and it's growing exponentially.
And it's not just copper and minerals, right? The mariners mentioned perishables. He talked about reefers, refrigerated containers.
Crucial. This is the agricultural boom. We're talking blueberries, avocados, grapes, cherries. These are high-value, time-sensitive products. You can't have a container of fresh blueberries sitting in a queue at the Panama Canal for a week. They spoil. They turn to mush.
The entire shipment is a loss.
Total loss. The direct, fast route opens up the massive Asian middle-class market to farmers in Peru and Chile in a way that was never possible before. It turns agriculture into a high-growth export sector. Suddenly, a farmer in the Andes is competing directly for shelf space in a Beijing supermarket. That changes the local economy fundamentally.
So Chansey isn't just a Peruvian port, it's rapidly becoming a regional hub.
The Singapore of Latin America. That is the stated ambition. Duration? It's serving as a collection and consolidation point. Goods from Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, and even Brazil are starting to flow toward Chansey to catch that fast ride to Shanghai.
Brazil? But that's on the other side of the continent.
But there is renewed serious talk of the Twin Ocean Railway concept linking Brazil's soy and iron ore fields across the Andes to the Pacific via Chansey.
Bypassing the Atlantic route entirely.
And bypassing the Panama Canal completely. Which brings us full circle to the counter strategies. You mentioned the Don Rowe Doctrine in the intro.
Yeah, the Don Rowe Doctrine. The consultant in Miami was obsessed with it. It seems to be the U.S. response, a mashup of populist rhetoric and the old Monroe Doctrine, the idea that we are back and this is our hemisphere.
But look at the mechanism of that return. In 2025 and early 2026, we've seen the U.S. focus intensely on political intervention. The abduction of Maduro, the legal battles over ownership of the Panama Canal terminals. It is reactive. It is security-focused. It is about stopping the other guy from using the old infrastructure.
Fighting for the keys to the old routes, as I said earlier. It feels like they are trying to put a toll booth on a road that everyone is now bypassing. They are fighting for control of a gate that is no longer the only way into the city.
Meanwhile, the Belt and Road approach here is focused on systemic efficacy. They aren't fighting for control of the old canal. They built a new door on the other side of the house. They focused on the hardware, the ports, the 5G, the cranes.
It really highlights a profound difference in philosophy. One feels like playing the board game, risk moving armies around and claiming territories. The other feels like playing SimCity, building utilities and zoning for density and growth.
Analogy. And the verdict of the Chansey shift is that in 2026, SimCity is winning. Result-oriented efficacy creates a stronger gravitational pull than procedural posturing or military displays. The wealth of South America is moving east, not because of some deep ideological conversion to communism. It's not because they love the Chinese political system. It's because the East built the most efficient road to the market.
It's the Chansey shortcut, in every sense of the word, not just for ships, but for development.
If you are a Brazilian soy farmer, or a Chilean miner, or a Peruvian avocado grower, you aren't looking at the flag on the ship. You are looking at the arrival time and the freight cost. And right now, the schedule and the price through Chansey are simply unbeatable.
So when we pull this all together, what does this all mean? We've looked at this from 3 distinct angles today. We started with Mateo in Lima, standing on that pier, seeing the very real difference between Western bureaucracy and Eastern speed. We saw state capacity in action building complex things quickly and effectively.
Then we moved to Elena in the Andes, connecting the raw minerals from her mine to the global industrial machine. We saw how physical output, actually making things, is the true currency of power in this new era.
And finally, we rode with the mariner, who showed us that when you cut costs by 20% and time by 2 weeks, the economic logic overrides almost any political narrative. The results-based reality wins every time.
It creates a powerful proof of concept. Chansey is more than just a port. It is a demonstration to the entire global South that there is a different way to organize the world. one that prioritizes speed, capacity, and physical results over process and procedure.
It really forces you to rethink what influence actually looks like in the 21st century. We often think of influence as treaties signed in gold pen or, aircraft carriers patrolling a coastline.
The old symbols of power.
The old symbols. But looking at the massive cranes in Chansey, watching those AGVs move silently in the night, it seems true influence is simply the ability to offer the world a faster path from point A to point B. When one side offers ideology and the other offers a 20% reduction in shipping costs, the map inevitably redraws itself.
And once that map is redrawn, it is very, very hard to draw it back.
That's a wrap for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.